Hi, welcome to Rock and Metal Invasion. My name is Steve. Coming up on the show today, I'm doing my top 10 hard rock metal albums from 1991. Now, I've done this before, started in 1985, and over the last, probably a year and a half, something like that, I've been doing top 10 albums from 85, 86, 87, 88, 89, 90, and now I'm up to 1991. And things are starting to change a little bit. The musical landscape is just starting to diversify perhaps a little bit. Other sounds are starting to come in. And I guess you could say the first shots are being fired and the sort of the start of the end of hair metal is beginning. But the start of the end of hair metal, I think that makes sense. Anyway, so 1991. So yes, we're talking about the first, I guess, some of the it's not the start of grunge, but definitely when some grunge bands start to hit the charts. And but you've still got some bands that would fit in the hair metal genre, putting out albums and still having some success. So if you've seen my previous episodes on my top 10 albums, you'll know the sort of bands that I've been enjoying over the years and would make my top 10. So let's see if some of those bands also feature in this top 10 for 1991. So all the albums that I have selected, I have in my collection, and they all happen to be on vinyl as well. Now, there's a lot of fantastic albums that were released in 1991, just like the other years where I've done this. It's difficult to cut it down to just 10. So I've got a pretty good amount of honorable mentions as well. So I will finish the show off with the honorable mentions. But first off, let's get into it. And my number 10. So, number 10 is a band that I've talked about quite recently, actually, on my top 10 AOR albums. This is Tyketto and their debut album, Don't Come Easy. So, this is a New York band fronted by Danny Vaughan on vocals, fantastic vocalist. As I talked about when I talked about this album recently on the AOR, top 10 AOR. Forever Young, fantastic song, but also, Burning Down Inside, Wings, Seasons, really good. Walk on Fire's another really good one. That starts off like you think it's not going to be that heavy a song, but then the guitars kick in. It's really great. That'd be probably Walk on Fire, maybe my second favorite song on the album, but it's really very solid album. And produced by Richie Zito. It wasn't a big hit, wasn't successful. Released on Geffen. Yeah, it's definitely. Although I put it on my it qualified as potentially an AOR album. Remember, that's from the Louder Sound top 10 or top 50, and I didn't turn it into a top 10. It's very much could also be put in the hair metal category as well. Now, it didn't do as well as they would have perhaps liked, but they just stick together and do another album. I think the next album might have been released on Music for Nations, called Strength in Numbers. But then after that, Danny Vaughan actually did leave the band, and Steve Augeri came in, who'd been in the band Tall Stories, who I think they released their album about this time as well, and also didn't really do too much. But so Steve's on the third album, Shine, and then he ends up being a vocalist for Journey, I think, for a little while after that as well. But really good album, and that's going to be number 10 on my top 10 hard rock metal albums from 1991. All right, coming in at number 9, I have gone with XYZ, or as we say in New Zealand, Z, and their album Hungry. So this is their second full-length album, the follow-up to the 1989 self-titled debut album, which was produced by Don Dokken. This time they've got George Tutko doing production with co-production by Neil Kernon. The guys are at the back there. Terry Eloise, he is the vocalist. He's French. In fact, I think the band is a French band, or at least when they first got together, they were in France. And there is, I think, a four-track EP that they put out in the mid-'80s when they were in France. But basically, this is their second full-length studio album. And for me, it's probably just as good as their first album. Initially, I think I preferred their first album, but this one's grown on me over time, and really got some good songs. Face Down in the Gutter. I'm pretty sure I've talked about that song before on my channel. Love that song. There's a music video for that. Really good, heavy song. It was one of the, maybe the only single, but also Don't Say No is a really good song. Fire and Water is a cover of the Free song. When the Night Comes Down is very good. Off to the Sun. When the Night Comes Down, Off to the Sun. If you like songs off their first album, those two songs very similar. When I Find Love is a ballad, but I really like it. I'm not necessarily a big ballad guy, but I do like that song. That's a really good one. But yeah, this album again, just like the Takedo one, again, it's very much they've got the hair metal image and sound, and again, musical landscape starting to change. Some people will say, "Oh, okay, for this come out in '89, it would have been huge." I don't know if that's true because I think there was still potential for bands like this to be big in '91. But maybe people were getting a bit tired of this image and sound. But anyway, it is a really solid album, and it's going to be number 9. Now they did put out a third album, but it doesn't have the same lineup, and not as good as called Letter to God. But it's okay. It's like I say, I'm a fan of Terry, the vocalist. I think he sounds great. But of course he ends up joining Great White there for a while as well. But yeah, anyway, number 9, XYZ and Hungry. All right, number 8. Now this is a lot more well-known band and more band solo artist actually, and an album that was a lot more successful as well. This is Ozzy Osbourne and this is his 6th solo album, No More Tears, and I think maybe one of his, if not his most successful album, because the title track No More Tears was very successful, was a hit. In fact, I think this has gone 4 times platinum. So the lineup on this one is Zakk Wylde. So this is I think his second album with Ozzy after No Rest for the Wicked. He's got Randy Costello on drums. Now Bob Daisley, who of course has worked with Ozzy in the past, he's not actually pictured on here. They've got Mike Innes on bass. Well, he's pictured here, but he didn't actually play bass on the album. It's Bob Daisley, and you've also got John Sinclair on keyboards and Randy Costello on drums. But yeah, it's a good album. I much prefer No Rest for the Wicked, to be honest. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's the production, just almost a bit too slick, not quite heavy enough. I don't think it's quite as heavy as the previous one. Yeah, there's some good riffs. Mr. Tinker Train, I liked. I Don't Want to Change the World. Mama, I'm Coming Home. I know that was also a bit of a hit for him, but not really into it that much. No More Tears, I do like the title track. Hellraiser, that's co-write with Lemmy, and I think Lemmy had a co-writing credit on I Don't Want to Change the World as well. I mean, Hellraiser ends up on the Motorhead album also. But there was a song that didn't make the album called Don't Blame Me, which I think is one of the best songs, would have been one of the best songs on the album if it had made the album, but it's a B-side. Ozzy always has some good B-sides, but yeah, so shame that's not on there. Don't Blame Me, that's a good song. I think that initially, I remember reading that was going to be the title of the album. Could be wrong, but that's what I remember reading at the time. But yeah, really good album. Still, it's making number 8. So, but yeah, not for me. Although this is his 6th solo album, I much prefer the previous 5. But I'm a big Ozzy fan, so it's still good. But yeah, for me, not as good as his previous albums. But there we go. That's coming in at number 8. Ozzy Osbourne and No More Tears. All right, number 7 now. This might be a bit of a surprise to some people, but I'm going to go with Kane Roberts and the album Saints and Sinners. Now, I am a bit of a fan of Desmond Child and his songwriting. I think he's very good with the songwriting. I guess that's why so many people have used his services over the years. He's co-written with Bon Jovi and Kiss, so some big names, had some big hits. This album though was not a big hit, but he does have a songwriting credit on every song. Now Kane Roberts probably most well known. This is his second album, so he had a album previous to this a few years back, but this is the second solo album, and of course he's known for having played with Alice Cooper. A couple of albums he put out in the mid-'80s. And I guess maybe that's where the connection with Desmond Child came in, because Desmond Child has, of course, been produced and did songwriting with Alice Cooper on the Trash album. So maybe that's the connection there. But yeah, some good songs on here. I really like Wild Nights. It's my favorite song on the album. But You Always Want It's also very good. Dance Little Sister. Jack Ponty also has a songwriting credit on that. So Jack Ponty and Desmond Child. Jack Ponting's kind of like he's like a Desmond Child sort of junior, if you know what I mean. Like very sort of similar, but not quite as big as Desmond Child. So interesting that those two have a songwriting credit on the same song. Rebel Heart, that's a good song as well. I like that one. It's got I don't really like this song that much. Does anybody really fall in love anymore? That was written by Richie Sambora and John Bon Jovi along with Desmond Child, and it was on the Cher album. I think at one point maybe they were thinking about putting it on the New Jersey album, but yeah, I don't. There's a music video I think for that one. But yeah, wasn't a hit, but has again like a lot of these albums that are in my top 10 that weren't hits, I think had total potential to be a hit. But yeah, Twisted is also there's a music video for that. I don't think that's one of the best choices of a first single. I think it was one of the first singles, but I would have gone for Wild Nights. But I mean, that's just me. But anyway, that is my number 7 on my top 10. Kane Roberts and Saints and Sinners. All right, coming in at number 6. It is time for the first grunge album to enter the charts on my chart anyway, my top 10 hard rock heavy metal albums from 1991. I mean, yeah, I think you probably got to put these guys in the grunge category. I am talking about Pearl Jam. So this is a band that the album's called 10, and this is a band that I guess formed from the ashes of Mother Love Bone. Really, there's a few guys from Mother Love Bone, but they had quite a few hit songs. Of course, Jeremy was big, but I was just like when this came out, it was just like any other sort of hard rock release. It was I was on the radio. I thought it sounded pretty good. I quite liked it. Yeah, I could tell it was a little bit different to the hair metal sounds that had been coming out, but I wouldn't compare it to Motley Crue. Obviously, they had different lyrics, different image, but Porch, that's one of my favorite Pearl Jam songs. I really like that one. The singles though as well, I do like. I like Jeremy, Even Flow. Alive is very good. I think that's a great song. I like the follow up as well, and then and this has a few good songs on it, but then I'm pretty much not so interested in Pearl Jam after that. But yeah, I like this album, and that is going to be number 6 on my top 10 from 1991. All right, number 5. It's another big band, very successful band who had lots of success. So I'm kind of counting this as one album, but it is 2. Yes, it's Guns N' Roses. So the Use Your Illusion 1 and Use Your Illusion 2. So possibly this is cheating a little bit by having 2 albums as one, but basically it's as I said, actually, as I've said before, I think that these if this was made into one album, it would have been one of the greatest hard rock heavy metal albums of all time. But it's so it's got so many songs on it, and some of them for me are just not that great. Unlike Appetite for Destruction, which was almost the perfect album, this one it's got songs that I skip or don't particularly enjoy listening to. So, but if I could take out the best songs, in fact, I've even created a playlist. So I've created a playlist where basically I've taken what I think are the best songs to create one album. I think there's only like 10 songs on it. Cut it down to just 10 songs. I mean, some of the songs are quite long as well, but yeah, when it was cut down to 10 songs, it was a really great album. But I still enjoy the albums. I mean, like I say, there's some great songs on here. But yeah, anyway, that is my number 5 selection: Guns N' Roses and Use Your Illusion 1 and 2. All right, number 4. This might surprise people. Going from Guns N' Roses and Pearl Jam, and then at number 4, it's going to beat those albums because for me, it's their best album, and it was like an album that at first I was like, oh, it's okay. It took a while to grow on me, and then I just couldn't stop playing it, and still really like it. I think it's their best album, and it's Europe and Prisoners in Paradise. So this wasn't successful. This is a band, of course, that had big hits with the Final Countdown. Out of This World, I think, had done okay for them, but this one not so much. Beau Hill production, I really enjoyed Beau Hill, in his production work. But all the songs on side one I think are fantastic. All or Nothing, Halfway to Heaven, I'll Cry for You, which is like a ballad, but it's really good. A Little Bit of Loving, Talk to Me, really good. Seventh Sign. Then opening up side two, Prisoners in Paradise. There's a music video for that. Really good, epic song. Really good stuff. Got Your Mind in the Gutter. It's just really solid. I mean, yeah, the first few songs are more the standout ones for me, but yeah, really good though. They recorded a lot of songs for this album. Well, I think initially they put the album forward, to their record label, and the record label said, we're not seeing any hits here. Go out and do some more." So they recorded a lot of songs for this album. These are the ones that made the cut, and I just think it's a um, really good album. If you search on YouTube, you can see the unreleased songs that didn't make the album. But yeah, this is really good, and yeah, probably a surprise to some people. But yeah, this is going to be number 4 on my top 10 hard rock heavy metal albums of 1991. Right. Number 3. So if you looked at my top 10 from 1990, there was actually a little bit of thrash that started to come in. So when this album came out in 1991, some people were probably a little bit disappointed that it wasn't as heavy or as thrashy as some of their previous albums. But for me, it didn't make that much difference because I wasn't a big thrash fan. In fact, when this came out, I was still really more just into the hair metal type bands, the hard rock, AOR, melodic rock, whatever you want to call it, type bands. But this is kind of what got me into this band. So Metallica, and I guess what's known as the Black Album, but I think it's just self-titled really. But I actually enjoy this album. Enter Sandman, of course, was the first single. That's a great song. But I mean, yeah, just lots of really good songs on here that I enjoy playing. Now, I've got to be honest with you, I don't play it a lot these days, but I did play it a lot when I first got it, all through the early 90s. I did play it a lot and enjoyed it. Even some of the lesser known songs like Of Wolf and Man, The God That Failed. I really enjoyed that. Through the Never, yeah. And of course, Nothing Else Matters, Sad But True. They were quite big songs. The Unforgiven, but they're good songs. Wherever I May Roam and Don't Tread on Me. I think they're really good songs. So yeah, I mean, it's making number 3, and there's a reason because I really like this album, and I know some people much prefer the Metallica albums from the 80s, and yeah, they're good, but I hadn't even heard these. I hadn't even heard those albums when I got this, so this was my sort of introduction to Metallica, and I was like, yeah, I'm totally on board with it. I'd heard a song or two, before this came out back in the day, and seen them in magazines. But I was like, I'm not sure they're really my thing. But yeah, when this came out, obviously it was a massive album for them as well. And I don't really mind Load or Reload, but yeah, those two albums, again, it's a little bit like Use Your Illusion. If you take Load and Reload and you turn it into one album, you'd have a pretty solid album there. But anyway, at number 3, I've gone with Metallica and the Black Album, or the self-titled album. All right, number 2. So we're getting down to the last 2 albums now. Now, I talked about Pearl Jam being a grunge album that was going to feature on my top 10, and I've got another one. And I hope Dan from Off the Charts is still able to continue watching this. But yes, it is your favorite band, Dan, Nirvana, and Nevermind. So it's actually their second album, but their first on a major label. It's not really an album I guess I need to talk about too much. I actually did do a show on Nirvana. So you can go back and look at that if you want to sort of get my opinion on Nirvana. But yeah, and my history with them. But when this album came out, I heard the song "Smells Like Teen Spirit" on the radio, and I thought, gosh, that's a good song. It's like one of the heavier songs I'd heard on radio. And yeah, thought, I need to check this album out. Checked it out, loved it. For me, it didn't matter that it wasn't hair metal. I was like, this, I enjoy this type of music. This is good. It rocks. Smells Like Teen Spirit's got a really great riff on it, but there's also other great songs. Come As You Are, Breathe. I think Polly's a really, even though it's a slower song, I think it's really, really good. Yeah, it's just like, it's angry and it's got lots of energy. And I'm like 2019 when this comes out, so yeah, I totally related to it. So yeah, I think this was cool. What annoyed me about it is when this came out, it was sort of like that was the bands that then started coming out were sort of a bit more like this, and the hair metal bands were now like, you know, major labels weren't suddenly not interested in them anymore. And I just didn't understand why, I couldn't enjoy this and then also enjoy Wildside or Bangalore Choir or, all those uh, other bands as well. But it was almost like, oh no, this is it now, and we're getting rid of the other one. So that was the only problem with this album and the grunge scene, is that it killed a whole lot of the other bands that I also liked. And there we go. Number two, Nirvana and Nevermind. All right, so number one. That's interesting, actually. When I think about my sort of, my top three, as you're about to find out, are big albums. They're very successful albums, uh, but and that's got nothing to do with me choosing them. This is the albums that I really really like. So I mean, I've got a few albums on this top 10 that weren't successful, but some of them were very successful, platinum selling albums. And this one, well, it's a band that's been very successful all through the 80s. They debuted in 1979. They've been together though, I think, since the mid 70s. They're on their second vocalist, but they're still going strong. So that was probably a big clue that helped you work out who it is. Yeah, so my number one album from 1991 is Van Halen and For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge, otherwise known as the Fuck album, right? So yeah, I mean, this is just start to finish, just great songs. I just feel like Van Halen really put some effort in on this. Sometimes I feel like they're a great band, but there's a few jokey songs, or maybe just they didn't really take it that seriously. Every song I feel like they put some real effort in on, and it's just great. Every song is just really good to great. Eddie on guitar, I think, just this is fantastic stuff. And Sammy, whether you like him or not, okay, I know we're not going to get into the Roth Hager debate here. I just think he's a very good vocalist, and I think he sounds fantastic on this. And the songs are there. The songs are just so good. I mean, Right Now was a big hit, but that's again, it's a great song. Pound Cake. I was watching the music video because I had to play this last night just to double check. Is it really my number one album? And it's just like it totally is. Pound Cake, great song. Judgment Day, Spanked, Run Around. There's a single music video for that. Man on a Mission, and then finishes at the Top of the World. This is a great song. That's the album closer. Yeah, production by Andy Johns and Ted Templeman. But yeah, fantastic stuff. So there we go. That's my number one album from 1991, Van Halen and For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge. So just to finish up with, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but I'll just talk about or just show you some of my honorable mentions. So these ones were definitely in the running to potentially make the top 10, but it's tough because I can only choose 10. So it doesn't mean I don't like these albums, but they didn't make the top 10. So this might surprise people because people know I love this band. But yeah, the Badlands album, Voodoo Highway. Now the debut album is for me one of the greatest albums of all time. I think it's fantastic. But this one not so great. It's not bad. It's not bad. Don't get me wrong. But it is not going to make the top 10. I really like The Last Time. That is just as good as anything on their first album. But after that, nothing as good. But still a very good album. So yep, that was in contention. Another album, or another band, sorry, that their previous two albums I'm sure have made my top 10, but this one didn't. This is Psychotic Supper by Tesla. Again, it was in the running, it was close, but because it does have some very good songs on it, but for me, it's not quite as good as their previous two, and yeah, it doesn't make the top 10. War Babies, and this is an album that I think it might just be self-titled. Yeah, came out in '91 and didn't get a lot of attention. But Brad Simpson is the vocalist. I've been in a couple of bands prior to this. He'd done Suicide Squad, an EP prior to this one coming out. And yeah, you would have thought that this could have actually been a hit, had some good songs. Paul Stanley, even from Kiss, did some co-writing on it, but yeah, it just didn't happen. But it's a really good album, some good songs on here. Song one of my favorite songs. I think Blue Tomorrow was a single, but I really like Cry Yourself to Sleep. That is a really good song. But yeah, there we go. Worth checking out. War Babies. The Cult Ceremony. So this was not as successful, I guess, as Sonic Temple, but Wild Hearted Son is on here, and that's a great song. But after that, the rest of the singles I don't think did so quite so good. I mean, Heart and Soul did okay, I guess, but yeah, I don't think it's got quite the quality of songs on it as Sonic Temple or even Love or Electric. I think those albums are better. Mr. Big, lean into it. Definitely considered it. It's got some good songs on it. Uh, is it better than their first album? It's very similar. I think it's very similar. I actually like My Kind of Woman. I think that's a really good song. Of course, it's got the big hit To Be With You. So it was a fairly successful album. Daddy Brother, Lover, Little Boy, the Electric Drill song. That's pretty good. But I saw also Green Tinted Mind. That's a really good song as well. But there's a couple, maybe a few songs on here I'm not that fussed about. But Mr. Big's always been a bit like that. It's like, oh yeah, I like that. Not so much the next one, but yeah, definitely we're in contention. This is their third album, LA Guns, Hollywood Vampires. Really solid album, actually. I enjoy this one. So it was in contention, but I think I prefer Cocked and Loaded more, and even maybe their first album a little bit more also. But yeah, it's a good album, but yeah, it didn't make the top 10. One of the lesser known ones, but was in contention. McQueen Street, good, solid, very much a hair metal album. Just look at the front cover, you can probably tell. Uh, and then the back there, they are the back there. My Religion, that's a good song when I'm in the mood. Some good songs on here. If you're into that sort of hair metal type sound, they've definitely got, great musicianship. But yeah, just, produced by Tom Werman. But, it didn't really happen for them. But yeah, I'm lucky to have that one on vinyl because that's not an easy one to get. And this one isn't either. This is the MSG, so Macaulay Schneidner Group, MSG from night. Well, some people think it's 92, but because it kind of some of the albums were released in some countries, I think, in 92, but in other countries it came out in 91. So I'm counting it as a 1991 release because it did get its initial release in 1991. I think it's better than the previous album, Save Yourself. I like When I'm Gone, which was a single. I think that could have been a big hit. I think it's really good. What else? It's just, We Believe in Love. That's good. Yeah, it's a solid album. Like I say, I much prefer it to Save Yourself. Perfect Timing. It's probably as good as Perfect Timing, which I do like. But yeah, this one didn't make the top 10, but it's a good album. Now, this one was very close. Maybe it might have been 11 or 12 if I had done a top 12 or top 11. This is Kix and Hot Wire. Really carrying on, really, from where they left off. Blow My Fuse, which was a hit. But this one, not so much, not so successful. And I guess this was kind of a bit of the start of where some of these bands, hair metal bands, if you want to call them that, from the 80s, those bands had some success and now finding they're not getting quite the response that they had got previously. But I mean, there's no reason why this wouldn't have been successful. Bumper Lala, that's great. Loverholic, Gil Money, really good stuff. Yeah, produced by Taylor Rhodes, which is interesting. I don't see him as a producer very much, but he is known as a songwriter. But I mean, either way, it's a great album, really good. But I guess the previous album as well. Had that hit ballad on it. That was the reason, I guess, that it was successful, and they just didn't manage to get that hit with this album. But it's a good album. I think they released one more after this, not on a major label. CMC, I think, put out their next album, and that pretty much got no attention whatsoever. And they split up, but they've reformed, and they just did their last concert, of course, quite recently. All right, Saigon Kick, they were in contention. Yeah, interesting band. So you talk about, the musical landscape changing. This is a really good example because Saigon Kick are almost like that sort of point of where alternative and hair metal kind of meeting together a little bit. But also, I think it's probably saying that a lot of these hair metal bands, if you want to call them that, or pop bands that would have been put maybe in that hair metal category are actually like starting to get a little bit more serious lyrically, image wise. It's less about the image, more about the music. They're experimenting a little bit. This is very got a lot of good variety to it, but also some good heavy stuff in here as well. What You Say, really good. Yeah, this is the Real Gone Music reissue, which is great for reissuing those albums that hard to get, were hard to get at the time. And the follow-up's pretty similar actually, but they had a hit. They did actually have a hit on the follow-up album, but which is doing pretty well for. I think they would have been in '92 probably when that came out. But yeah, Saigon Kick, their debut album from 1991, was in contention, and this might surprise people that this didn't make the top 10. So I thought I'd better mention it. To be honest, it was not in contention. I was never ever thinking it would make the top 10. Slave to the Grind by Skid Row. I do like Monkey Business. I know they got heavier on this album, but for me, I I don't love this album particularly. I think it's okay, but I much prefer the debut album. And it's not that they just got heavier. I was like, I don't have a problem with them being heavier. It's just I just don't think the songs are as good. But yeah, I do really like Monkey Business. But yeah, otherwise, and if, this is from the box set. I've got the box set. But really, for me with Skid Row, I do enjoy the debut album. But and I know Slave to the Ground was very successful for them. Well, at least it went to number one, but which I guess is successful. But then they didn't really have the hits on it, right? There were no big hits like that had on their previous album. So yeah, maybe it wasn't as successful as they would have liked it to have been. And they went off and toured with Pantera, and I love Pantera, but yeah, it's an interesting combination. Yeah, so anyway, there we go. That is my top 10 from 1991, along with lots of honorable mentions as well. So I guess at some point I'll do 1992. Not sure if I'll do 93, because 93 is an interesting year, isn't it? Where really those bands that have been coming up on my top 10 quite a bit over the through the 80s and into the early 90s really are starting to disappear. And yeah, I'm not sure about a 93, but of course I haven't done 84 or 83 or any of the early 80s either, so maybe I'll go back to those. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed the show today. If you have, hit the thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed and you want to be notified of future content, hit the subscribe button. It's great to see the subscription numbers going up. And I will be back later with a new show. All right, thanks for watching. See ya.